WrestleMania, the granddaddy of them all. It's every wrestler's dream to compete at a WrestleMania. It truly is the Super Bowl of wrestling. Steve Austin, The Rock, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, the list of greats to perform at the Showcase of Immortals is endless. But there's only one man, one wrestler in the history of the WWE whose name is synonymous with WrestleMania itself. When you think of WrestleMania, you think of The Undertaker. The Undertaker was the gimmick that shouldn't have worked, yet Mark Calaway made it one of the most famous wrestling characters of all time. Mark crafted the character to absolute perfection, but one thing he couldn't have planned was the legacy of the streak. The streak was never initially intended. Undertaker himself claims it wasn't until about 8 or 9 WrestleManias in when someone finally pointed out to him that he had never lost at WrestleMania. Realizing they had an opportunity here, the WWE soon began promoting the fact that The Undertaker had never lost there. And from there, a legend was born. For the next decade, fans from all around the world would tune in to see if this year was the year that the streak would be broken. And each and every year, the streak continued. But all good things must eventually come to an end. Brock Lesnar is maybe the most legitimate wrestler of all time. NCAA champion, UFC heavyweight champion, youngest WWE champion, and overall freak. So if anyone could break the streak, in kayfabe, it was Lesnar. At WrestleMania 30, Brock Lesnar challenged The Undertaker at WrestleMania. This is a dream matchup in many ways, but despite having put on bangers together in the past, this match didn't go that well. The Undertaker looked tired, slow, spaced out, and the match as a whole didn't really capture the crowd's imagination. Until the very end, when Brock Lesnar hit an F5 and pinned The Undertaker and the ref counted 3. The crowd was stunned. 21 years of seeing The Undertaker's hand raised at WrestleMania, and suddenly the streak was over. The wrestling community couldn't believe what had just happened. As legitimate a competitor as Brock Lesnar is, most people didn't really think he would break the streak. It's tradition that when a wrestler is nearing the end of their career, like The Undertaker was, that they put over the new, younger talent to help establish the new faces of the company as legitimate stars. Brock Lesnar was already a star and a household name, so there wasn't really a need to pass the torch to him. Because of that, Brock Lesnar wasn't really seen as a threat to The Undertaker's streak, despite being literally the most threatening man you'll ever see. So when the ref's hand counted 1, 2, 3, the audience was stunned. You can feel the live audience waiting for some sort of announcement, thinking any second now the decision would be reversed and the match would start over. But it didn't happen. So what did happen? Was this a mistake? Did Brock Lesnar go into business for himself and legitimately hurt and pin The Undertaker? Is The Undertaker knocked out? Surely this can't be how the streak ends. Then Lesnar's music finally hit, and his name was announced as the winner of the match, and it was all official. The end of an era. The internet was not happy, their main point being that Brock Lesnar didn't need this. Bray Wyatt, rest in peace, being the obvious choice to break the streak in their eyes. He was not only a breath of fresh air with incredible promos and presentation, but he was also the perfect successor to The Undertaker's gimmick. They had just wasted a potential star-making opportunity on a guy who was already a star. This would be like if John Cena won the Royal Rumble and went on to defeat Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40 instead of Cody Rhodes. It just didn't make sense. The fan reaction quickly went from shock and disbelief to anger and frustration. Then, during the show, news broke that The Undertaker had been taken to a nearby hospital and Vince McMahon had gone with him. The main event of the 30th annual WrestleMania hadn't even started yet, and now Vince McMahon had left the building. This only fueled more conspiracy theories online, thinking that Brock Lesnar must have intentionally beat up and hurt The Undertaker and then pinned him to steal that moment for himself. The minds of the fans were made up, and they thought they had just witnessed another, perhaps more brutal, version of a screw job. But it doesn't stop there. As time went on, we would come to learn more and more about what really happened that day, and it's almost just as interesting as what we saw on TV and only adds to the lore of this monumental moment. So what did actually happen? The decision to break the streak was not final or even pitched to The Undertaker until mere hours before the show started. According to Taker on a recent podcast with Chris Van Vliet, Taker says he got to the building that day thinking he was going to win the match, and at about 1:30 in the afternoon, he was told he would be losing and ending his WrestleMania streak that night. His wife Michelle would join him in the backstage area, and they were discussing how he was feeling about losing that night, and according to Taker, this is his last memory of that day. Several hours later, during the match with Brock Lesnar, Taker would in fact get concussed in the ring. I've had concussions before, and the worst one I've ever had was also in a wrestling ring when a wrestler landed a senton on my head. I wasn't knocked out, but I did black out for about 5 minutes, and I don't remember anything from that 5-minute period. Undertaker, on the other hand, is missing several hours from that day, including the several hours before and after the actual match, which speaks to the severity of the concussion. During the match, fans did notice that he was looking a little out of it, but watching it back, it definitely looks like he's mostly just selling, which makes it a little bit of a cried wolf situation in that it's difficult to pinpoint when Undertaker was concussed exactly. He sells like this for most of the match, including very early on before taking any major bumps, but his offense still looks pretty sharp for the most part. Undertaker himself says he believes the concussion happened pretty early on, and he's probably right. But watching it back, I believe he suffers a concussion several times during the match. As he says himself, he feels his body just wasn't used to the physical toll a wrestling match can take on your body after having been out of the ring for about a year. And what I believe happened is he suffered several concussions in about 4 separate instances. I think he got a little rattled with this bump on the floor. Definitely was a hard bump to take. His head doesn't seem to hit, but as a 50-year-old man taking his first bump on the floor in over a year, this definitely must have rattled him. But he seems to be okay for the most part. He's still moving pretty well. He doesn't seem to be too sluggish in his offense, at least. That is until this bump. First, Taker goes for the Hell's Gate on Lesnar, and Lesnar picks him up and slams him down. Perhaps feeling like the slam didn't look impressive enough, they do it again. Taker gets the Hell's Gate, and this time Lesnar hoists him high and slams him down hard, and you can see Taker's head bounce off the canvas. The first bump on the floor might have been a slight head rattle, but this, I'm sure, must have been a concussion. The next one comes with the German suplexes from Brock Lesnar. Taker's body just couldn't handle this type of bump anymore. Brock's Germans are a tough bump, where guys like Redacted would lift you up and bring you pretty much straight down, more like a chokeslam bump. Lesnar tosses you as far as he possibly can, which, when you're Lesnar, is pretty damn far. The way to take this is to really roll through it, because with this backwards motion, it's nearly impossible to tuck your chin in because all the momentum is moving back and away from you and your head is going to bounce. Especially when you're Taker, being 50 years old, that neck just isn't as strong as it once was. And with Taker being as big as he is, he can't really roll through it, and thus you see his head hit hard. And then it hits hard again. I believe this second German suplex was his 4th concussion of the night. And after the second German suplex, you can see with the way his arms are moving here, he doesn't really look like he's selling a wrestling move. He looks more like a UFC fighter that just got knocked out. Taker's barely there at this point. Was this done intentionally by Brock? Absolutely not. In fact, fewer people know Taker's wife Michelle, Vince McMahon, and Brock Lesnar himself all left the arena to go to the hospital with The Undertaker. This match overall was a little lackluster, I think because Taker knew he was somewhat limited in the ring at this stage, but I don't think his body was ready for a match of any kind, let alone one with Lesnar. In the hospital, Taker didn't even know his own name, and said it didn't come back to him until about 4:30 the following morning. That's roughly 15 hours of no memory whatsoever. So was breaking the streak at WrestleMania 30 to Brock Lesnar the right decision? To be perfectly honest, Taker's streak probably should have ended sooner, but I don't think having him lose to Lesnar was a mistake. Only because in hindsight, it's one of the most iconic moments of all time. Some of it for the right reasons, some of it for the wrong reasons, but put that together and you get a monumental piece of wrestling lore that simply can't be ignored. Could this have happened with someone like Bray Wyatt? Maybe. But because it was Lesnar and because people thought he legitimately beat up The Undertaker and stole a win, this is a piece of wrestling lore that will live on to be just as iconic as the streak itself.